Welcome back to the podcast, Rob. Good to have you here again.
Thank you very much.
Today I want to talk about, last week we did a podcast and I felt like there were still some things. We got to about 45 minutes, I think it was around there. And there's still some things that I wanted to ask you about your client work and like your experiences as a freelancer, because you've been a freelancer for so long. And so we're going to do a second one. I'm going to finish this up and then we're going to take some questions from the audience. So if you guys got any questions about Android development, client work, what kind of Android technologies we think are like the ones you should learn about, you can just, put them in the comments or in the live chat, which side it's on, and we'll try and get to your questions.
It's here for me. It's mirrored. Oh, it's weird.
Yeah, it's mirrored. All right. So what I want to start with is I don't remember if I asked you this, so I want you to tell me, like, what is some of the most recent client work that you've done? Like, what are the specific things, the specific components of the app that you were working on?
Sure. So I think I've had one client for the last probably year and a half, which was the same client, and for them it's the whole app. I've probably touched every part of the app, which is kind of nice because then you get to feel like ownership and you get to make it look and like code wise how you would like it to be. So you get to do that. But in terms of I think everywhere that I've worked, to be honest, I've probably touched the whole app. Usually the way it works isn't that you get like a component of the app, like you might, but so most of the places that I work, they work in sprints. So say 2-week sprints, which is basically, you've got a 2-week block of work and in 2 weeks time, whatever's done, we release and then we start again. And so, for this sprint, you might be working on, I don't know, the profile screen. And so then that's your thing for this sprint. And then next sprint, it might be something else. So generally you end up touching the whole app. And even the shortest contracts that I've done, which are probably maybe 3 months, in that time, you probably still end up touching the whole app. So.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So when you get hired for these, so I wasn't sure about, what you got hired for. I wasn't sure if you get hired as like the only Android dev, or you get hired onto a team where you're working on like a piece of an app. So you mostly, like the client work that you've done, you get hired and you're on the Android team, whatever that means. And you guys do it all, and you just do like
so I've done both, where I'm the only person on the team, and then essentially for the period of time that I'm there, the Android app is mine, whatever I want to do with it. And then I've done where I'm on a team, which could be 2 people, it could be 6 Android developers, it could be more. But generally the contract work that I do, or generally contract work in general, if you're not getting paid on a per project basis, you're essentially hired help. So whatever they want doing on the Android app is what you do, and that's not necessarily like negotiated from the offset. They don't, you don't get hired to build a specific screen. You get hired to work on the Android app. And then by the time between the hiring process and time you get there, what they wanted you to do might have changed. So they might have had in mind that, oh, you're going to work on this, but by the time you get there, oh, it's more important that you work on this. So I've done both, but generally you get hired to work on whatever the Android app is. And if there's none, then you get hired to build it from scratch, but you don't necessarily get ownership of the part of the app. You're Android developer, you work on the Android app.
What kind of what's like the coolest sort of thing? Actually, it doesn't even necessarily have to be the coolest thing. What is like the this very I want to be like, I know you said profile screen or like whatever screen. I want to like, what are the specific things that these apps that you worked on? I don't know, like if you're allowed to share that information.
Sure.
Some clients have NDAs and you're like, they're like really weird and stupid. Like you can't talk about like how you built this like list. I don't like, why is that not allowed anyway? So whatever, like you could talk about that's like the most specific possible of the things that you've been working on.
Sure. So I guess probably I think so most of the clients I work with have NDAs, and I don't know, like I'm not a lawyer, so I don't
you're not sure what you can say, right?
But I can definitely talk about technical stuff because like it's like if you can find it in the tutorial, then there's no way that I can't talk about it because I've done it before.
Makes sense.
So I guess some of the more interesting stuff, I think the most interesting stuff that I've done recently is probably like Firebase related stuff, which is like not super technical or super complicated, but you could do some nice stuff with Firebase. And stuff like, for example, like updating strings remotely, where instead of doing context get string, you have some sort of container where it will check against Firebase remote config, and if there's an alternate for that string, you can supply that. So you could have, and then you can do A/B testing. So you can have an app that has the same screen, but 5 different people will see 5 different versions of the text on this button, and then you can see which one performs better.
So how do you in Firebase? I know you mentioned remote config and A/B testing. So how do you choose the specific devices that get like string A or string B or string C?
Well, you have options. So you can do just random, which is 50% of users are going to get this, and I think Firebase, just whoever hits it first, you're going to get put into a group A or B, and you get whichever string is for A or B. You can do other things where you can target by version of the app. You can target by, I think you can target by people that have purchased stuff. So say if you have Firebase Analytics integrated, then you can target based on a different event. So, a user saw this screen because Firebase Analytics said they saw this screen. So every user that's seen this screen will get this text, and every user that hasn't will get this text. And you can get like more niche into it. So that kind of stuff is super cool.
Yeah, that's cool. Like I could just imagine like, okay, you have an app and like this user spent this much time on like this screen doing this thing. And then you could say, okay, well, like let's fire them out, string X, and then then they'll get, whatever kind of visual representation, and you can put them into a funnel or like whatever.
Yeah. And you can also do things where, for example, let's say you have a crash that affects a bunch of users. So you can target, I'm pretty sure you can target Firebase push messaging to users that have experienced a specific crash. So let's say, they had this crash, it was there for a week, and then you fixed it, and then you could send out a push notification to all those users. And let's say, you're playing a game that has in-app purchases, you could send them free money and be like, oh, I'm really sorry it crashed. Here's free money.
That's pretty awesome.
There's a bunch of stuff that you can do that like users would find really nice, and it's super easy to do stuff like that. Like that's the stuff that I find the coolest, because like the tech stuff is cool, but you write a class, you write a fragment, all that's the same. But the stuff that you can do with that, with like these new technologies, I find that really interesting.
Directly, like you see a direct effect on the customer. Like you feel like you're in control of like what the customer is doing with the app.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
that's really cool. Yeah, I'm like exploding with ideas from like what you just said, from like all the different things.
I mean, when I found out about stuff like that, I was like, that's super cool. And then they do stuff like the one that I found, which I haven't used yet, but I'm thinking about using it in a couple of my apps, is the predictive analytics, where they can target users that they think are going to purchase something. And then so you could have different copy for those users, or a kind of different user journey for those users, and kind of see how that like affects your bottom line. That stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. And that's all included in Fire. Like that's getting through Google's algorithm. Like they're doing all the work for you. They're doing the predictive things, and they're saying, hey, like you should probably like send some money to this guy because he'll probably spend money, or like whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, they do everything for you. Basically, you implement an SDK, and then you just go on the console and you be like, find users that might buy stuff and do this action. And that's it.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So like when you're building all of these like remote config, like all of these different I'm going to call them views, even though it's not the right word. All these different views that they could potentially see based on the different remote config options that you send out to them from the different groups. How do you architect that in the app? Like what kind of things do you do to like be like, oh, they saw this string, so let's show them this? Like how's your architecture affected by that?
So the best way that I've found to work with remote configs so far is kind of, you have a remote config manager class or something like that. And so at points in your app, you have, so remote config works with just a string, right? So you have a remote config string called, I don't know, view X. And then you can go to you just call your remote config manager and you say, if view X is true, and on the remote config console, you've set it as true or false, then in the app, you decide to take this action. That's the nicest way that I found to do it.
But where more specifically, so you have this remote config class. Where's that sitting? Like, is it in a view model? Is it at the top of a fragment?
Totally out. Yeah, I gotcha. So you would have your remote config in, like, say, let's call it remote config manager, and it's inside a package called managers. And let's assume you've got other managers, data manager, whatever. And then inside your, let's say you're doing MVVM, you would have inside your view model, you would have an instance of your remote config manager, and then you could listen to that for callbacks to say, if is enabled. And so recently, probably like the last year and a half, 2 years, I've really liked using Coin for dependency injection, which works really great for that, because then you have the same instance of your remote config manager everywhere.
Yeah, that was my next question.
Yeah, that's the way that I like to do it. I've used Dagger before. I was not keen on it, but Coin is really nice. So.
Yeah, the learning curve for Dagger is not friendly.
It's so steep. No.
Yeah, but Hilt, have you taken a look at Hilt yet?
I haven't yet. No.
Hilt is like if I was to put it at a scale, it would be like, I don't know, at least like 4 to 5 times simpler.
Okay.
Than Dagger. It is Dagger, but like it's just way simpler. They've clearly listened to the people, and the people have said Dagger's great, but it's fucking hard.
I mean, I've worked with it enough before, and I don't really understand it apart from I get into a project and I copy and paste what someone else has done because I knew that it worked. But I never understood like the intricacies of it, and I felt like the learning curve was so steep that I didn't need to. Like the copy and paste worked fine. But Coin is like, I get it. I understand like you could have I could have a remote config manager and I could have 3 different versions of it, and I understand how to like that stuff works. But what do you think about Hilt? Have you used Coin before? Or
yeah, I've used Coin. Yeah, Coin's great too.
What do you think about Hilt versus Coin?
Well, they're 2 different things. So like Dagger is dependency injection, so it does code generation. So like at compile time, it builds your dependencies, whereas Coin will build those dependencies at runtime. So technically speaking,
they're different.
Yeah, well, technically speaking, the Dagger or Hilt version is like more efficient. Like even though it's probably negligible. Like honestly, in like everybody who's watching, and probably 95% of projects, probably even more, the efficiency that you gain from using the compile time dependency injection, which is Dagger or Hilt, is like negligible. It doesn't matter. So like probably just go use Coin or whatever, because
this is not where you should spend your time like optimizing.
Yeah, because it's not exactly. It's not like efficient for you to spend your time there. But like the reason I use Dagger is just because technically it's the best. Okay. So like, I mean, I just use it, even though Coin is, I used that too, and it was great. So
okay. Yeah. So the learning curve on Hilt, you think is on par with Coin in terms of how easy it is to get started?
Pretty close. Like, well, like for example, I did a Dagger course, I don't know when, like a year ago or a year and a half ago. And like just that Dagger course is like, I don't know. I don't even know how many videos, a lot of videos, like more than 20 probably. Yeah. And they're long and it's hard. I have a new Hilt playlist that I made, last month or something. And within like 7 videos, which are not long videos, I've gone through everything basically that you need to know about Hilt, plus testing stuff. Nice. So like, that's like, if you just look at the volume of videos that I produced of Dagger versus the ones that I produce of Hilt, there's like 4 to 5 times less. Plus there's more information in the Hilt series. Gotcha. So like, I mean, just if you look at that, I would, there's a huge time savings there. Okay. So it's a lot easier, like a lot easier.
Okay, cool. I have seen your Hilt videos pop up on my feed. I just haven't got around to watch them yet. So
yeah, it's pretty straightforward. I think it's an easy watch. Like if you have like, watch a video a day for a week and you'll be like, oh, that's easy.
Okay. All right. Awesome. All right. I'll try that and I'll let you know.
Yeah, cool. So now what the hell? Okay, so we were talking about architecture and how you set up this remote config thing. So you have a package full of managers. You put the managers into the different view models, and then you observe the managers and update the UI accordingly.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct,
I mean, that seems like a nice system. Okay. Yeah. Cool. So what other, like, what about Android specific, like Android framework stuff? What kind of like cool Android framework stuff have you worked on, like in terms of services or like camera or Bluetooth, whatever?
Yeah. So camera, not so much. Bluetooth, I've done a decent amount. I hate Bluetooth. I feel like Bluetooth just does not work on mobile, period. It's always been super broken. I think the most kind of interesting services type stuff I've done is working with the notification listener, which is, I think it's been out since like 4.3, and the accessibility service is pretty cool as well. That's kind of how I built a bunch of my first apps, because they all worked with notifications. So that was accessibility listener, then notification listener came in, and that's like super cool because you can do, so now it's more common, but it was originally, there was only a few apps where you'd have like a quick reply. And it wasn't really.
Oh, you mean so the notification that has the thing?
Yeah.
Right.
So
Okay.
it has like you press reply and you can reply in the notification. But
Right.
before that, you had Android Wear, and the Android system sent all of the notifications. So Android Wear had, somebody could send a notification to their phone. It would have a reply option, which you didn't have access to on the phone. But the notification still got sent through the notification listener. So if you implemented that, you could basically piggyback on the Android Wear notification. And that's basically how one of my apps works, which lets you reply to notifications with voice. Is it used to take the Android Wear notification and pull out the intent to reply, and then you just record whatever you reply. It does text to speech to text, and then just injects it into that intent and sends it off, and then the app handles the whole thing. So that's
cool.
that's probably the most interesting / hacky thing that I've worked with. I really like that, and I still use that to this day. So
cool. So like, what would you say, like for the people who are watching and like people who are just starting freelancing, or maybe they already do freelancing, whatever, what are like the set of Android tools that you think are like valuable to know, like the most valuable? And what I mean is like Jetpack, I don't know if you use navigation components, work manager, all of those view models, MVVM versus MV whatever, what kind of things are like the most marketable skills, you think?
Okay. So I would say, to preface that, is if we're talking about what I do, which is the majority is not, you don't build the app from scratch. There's some sort of platform, or maybe you build the app from scratch, but you're working on a team, right? So your knowledge is only as good as the other people on the team. Because if you know Jetpack Compose and nobody else on the team does, then that's not going in the app. So forget that. So I would say the most valuable things are probably not Android related frameworks. They're SDKs. So, Glide or Picasso, Retrofit, knowing how to use Room properly. Those, I'm trying to think if there's any more, but that's probably be the basics for most jobs.
Right.
Because everything else is like, there's the services are pretty basic, and then you can get more complicated where you've got like job scheduler or work manager, or, maybe still using timers and all that kind of stuff. But those are things that if you know Android, the learning curve on that is not that steep. But the things that you would get hired for, because most at least job specs that I see, they only really list like SDKs and how long have you been doing it, and do you have any portfolio that you can show that you've done. But most of the people that are hiring, they don't know what work manager is. They don't know the difference between, intent service and a regular service. They don't know what a fragment is. So, it's like, you should know those things, but I think the most important thing is the basics. So, you need to know a framework, which could be MVP or MVVM. And I personally feel like if you know one, it's not a steep learning curve to piggyback onto the other one. And then you need to know like these SDKs, so that if you're in a position where you have to jump into an app that's already built, you understand like, all right, they're using Glide, this is how this works. And, they're using Retrofit, and I've used Retrofit, so that's cool. I would say like RX Java is probably a must know, at least right now, over Kotlin Flow, because Kotlin Flow is super new. So unless you are getting into a project where the app has just started being built, it's probably not using Kotlin Flow, and it's using RX Java. So if you don't know how that works, then then you can't. Like, I think the thing to remember about freelancing is that people expect you to know, quote unquote, everything when you get there, because you're a freelancer, you're not staff, and you're probably getting paid more than the staff, and you're kind of just supposed to hit the ground running. So as long as you know the basics, and you could jump into a project and be like, right, RX Java, I don't know everything about RX Java. Like, if you ask me about back pressure, I don't understand what that means. But like, I could figure out what the bits I don't know, I could figure out, and I know enough to hit the ground running. And I feel like those would be the most important things to know. And then the other stuff is what you learn as you go. Like, when you need to use a work manager, you figure out to use a work manager.
That makes total sense. That is like the most logical answer I think you could have as at least as like a I was about to say young freelancer, but I don't even think it really matters if you're like a very experienced freelancer, because there's always going to be new stuff. Like either way, forever and always, it's going to be impossible to know everything.
Yeah, you can't. So there's no way that you can know everything. It's like it is
impossible.
Yeah, you like most of the stuff, or at least speaking personally, most of the stuff that I learn as I go. And then, if I know right now there's some new thing that's come out and everyone that's hiring, you need to have experience in something, like let's say hilt, everyone starts deciding, all right, you need to know hilt, then I'll go and learn hilt. But until that happens, I'll learn hilt because I want to learn it personally for my own projects, or just because I want to learn it, or because I'm working on a project where we want to implement it. But if you try and go out and learn everything so that you're hireable by everyone, then one, you've wasted your time because you've learned 100 things and they're only hiring you based on 5. And 2, by the time you've learned all those things, you're already behind, because like you've learned 100 things and there's 50 new things that now you need to know. So
exactly, yeah. From what my takeaway from what you said, and I would agree 100%, is know like know enough in like everything, like know that it exists, know a little bit about it, and just know enough that like you see it in a code base, you're like, okay, I recognize that, I know what that is. Now let me go and like figure out what this back pressure thing is, because it looks like they're using it, or whatever. Like whatever the more detailed version of that is.
I think that's probably the like it's, imagine if you go into an app and they used RxJava extensively and everything is like nicely, you know, mapped and flat mapped and stuff. If you don't know what that is, then you're absolutely lost and you have no idea how to approach it. How do you add stuff? But if you, like what you just said, I understand what it is, but I don't understand how to use it, I can go and figure it out. Otherwise you're stuck, because you can't really take a job and then be like, oh, hey, I don't understand any of this class. Can someone please explain to me what this is? But there's no problem saying, you know, give me half an hour, give me an hour, and I'll go and Google some stuff, and then I come back with a PR. It's like, that's totally acceptable.
Right. Gotcha. Good answer. So what about Kotlin or Java? How has that changed from like the time that you started 8 years ago to now?
A lot. So I would say probably about 4 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. I don't know the timeline, but I remember Kotlin had been out for maybe 2 years, but it wasn't, you know, official yet. That it was in Android Studio and stuff. And that's when I started seeing job specs saying, you know, you need some experience in Kotlin. And now it's like, now almost definitely you need both. And that's the same thing. You don't need to know everything about Kotlin. You just need to know how to use it, and you know, you need to be able to read it and you need to be able to write it. But all the intricacies of, like, you know, using maps or filters or whatever, Kotlin flow, you don't need to know that. But I would say right now you need to know both. And mostly because even if you're a new developer, let's say you've never learned Android before and you're starting today, if you learn Kotlin, that's great. But now you can only work on essentially new apps, because most apps were written in Java. Even the last like 2 years, they're like Java Kotlin hybrids. You would have to be working on like a new app that's only just been written
brand new.
Brand new, written in the last year, and whoever wrote it in Kotlin. And that goes back to the same thing, whereas if you're working on a team, 2 years ago, you wouldn't have people that were super proficient in Kotlin. So there's no point in, you know, the team lead saying, right, we're going to write in Kotlin, because now 5 people in your team, they're going to be able to only give 50% of their effort because they've been doing Java for this whole time. So like, I would say you have to learn both and like kind of pick it up as you go. But you probably like, I personally think Java is the better foundation, also because Java means that you can work on other things, not just Android. So if you don't like it, or, you know, let's say in the next 5 years, Android disappears, then you have job skills. Whereas Kotlin, like, I'm sure Kotlin can be used for other things, but Java is like a super widely required skill in all different industries. And Kotlin, at least as far as I'm aware, is not. So
yeah, I would I mean, I agree that learning both definitely gives you the best opportunity for sure. And then I would also say that if you know Java, learning Kotlin is very easy. Like it is a very smooth transition. Like if I was to give out numbers, like average numbers, for sure within a month of like not even spending all of your time, like you'd be really good. Like you'd be like, I feel as good at Kotlin as I am at Java, for sure.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
And probably for some of you, it would happen within a week, probably. Like not even, and like, you don't have to know like the really fancy like Kotlin stuff, like refied stuff or whatever. I don't even know how to pronounce it, but like all of the like really the more difficult, more advanced Kotlin things, you don't have to know those. You just like to be like competent, you probably will be fine in like a week of like not even spending like 8 hours a day. Just like try and rebuild some private project that you've been doing in Java, and just like be like, okay, I'm going to build it in Kotlin. It'll probably be very straightforward.
Yeah,
so that's all I would say.
I was going to suggest as well. Like, take something that you've done and rebuild it in Kotlin, and you'll get it super quick.
So what about What about Flutter? Do you see, how has that changed? Like in terms of like the jobs that you've seen available? I don't know if you look like I'm sure, I'm assuming you're shopping for Android jobs. You're gonna see Flutter pop
I
up.
mean, yeah, I see a bunch. Like right now, I'm not actively looking, but I still happen like in my LinkedIn feed, I see a bunch. I get emailed a bunch, and people contact you, and they'd be like, "Hey, Rob, are you free for whatever?" So I see a bunch. In terms of Flutter, I can't speak to how much of like the job market there is for Flutter, but I can say that it's, I think, at least for most companies and probably startups as well, it's a bit up in the air as to whether, like, I think people don't really know where Flutter's going, so people are reluctant to commit to saying, right, we're going to build the app in Flutter. And I think, I mean, I think it's kind of similar to the React Native days, which was, and that was also my opinion, and I used to tell people, like clients, the same thing, which was, you know, let's say Flutter's cool, right? And I've seen some of it. I watched some of your videos on it, or at least I watched your video that you talked about what you thought about it. And I've seen like other people like writing stuff on YouTube, like coding, and watch them. And so like it seems pretty cool. And the fact that it compiles to both is awesome. But I think the thing that you have to remember is, especially when you're freelancing, is one, do you want to put yourself in a box that I do Flutter, and then if Flutter doesn't take off, or I do Flutter and there's no jobs? And two, as a company, I think the big thing is, do we want to build a whole app in Flutter? Flutter doesn't take off, or and then we're stuck with this code base that we can't use. Or right now, there's not the same quantity of really experienced Flutter developers as there are Android and iOS. So, you know, let's say I bring in a team of 5 really experienced Flutter developers, they start building this app, and then they leave. How easy is it going to be to replace them versus how easy am I going to find 5 really experienced, or 5 really iOS, or 5 really experienced Android developers? So, I mean, I think it's cool for personal projects, especially because it compiles to both. So as an Android developer, that would be really cool for me to be able to release an app on both platforms. But in terms of a technology and like freelance work, I wouldn't say I don't advocate it, but I can definitely see the downsides if it doesn't take off. And I guess nobody really knows what's going to happen. Like I feel like being a Google thing, it probably will be around for a while, but it's just how much do you want to take that risk, and how much do you want to put yourself in a box versus, you know, learning Java, and then, you know, you've got an easy transition to Kotlin. And then if I want to go and decide to build some sort of backend server, you can do that as well, because you could do that in Java. So
that's a good answer. That's probably one of the best answers that I've heard, honestly.
okay.
Like it was great because you addressed like practicality from like a freelancer's perspective, practicality from like a company's perspective. Like,
Yeah.
why would we build with Flutter? What are the risks involved? It's, yeah, the risks are like, is it going to stick around? That's obviously, even though, yes, probably.
Yeah.
Will I be able to find people to replace the developers that I have?
Yeah.
And then from the perspective of the freelancer, yeah, like, will I be okay? I'm going to put myself in this box. So you're basically extending yourself, and and it might be great for like 3 years, or might be great for 10 years. I don't know.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, at the end of that period of time, what if Flutter goes away? What if there's less jobs? Now you've spent 10 years on something that gives you no other skills, basically. But at the same time, like, it could be great. Like I like Flutter. I spent a month on it, and I thought it was an awesome technology for sure. Yeah, but there's definitely risks involved. And the perfect scenario probably to use Flutter is on a personal project, because then there's no risks. Like the finding other developers risk gone. The dependency on other people gone. So like you just get something out. Does it do what I wanted it to do? Yes or no? Great. Cool. You know, yeah.
I think personal projects is a great one. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is just because it's the unknown. Like if we knew, like if Apple turned around tomorrow and they were like, right, we're 100% behind people building Flutter apps, and, you know, Google integrated it into Android Studio, and they were like, right, we're depreciating Java and Kotlin, and everything is now just going to be Flutter, and you can build on both, then go for it. But until that happens, if you don't know, it's just people's personal preference. But my personal preference is I like to stick to what I think is going to be better in the long term.
Yeah, the highest probability that for success in the future. And at this point, I agree. Like, although I think Flutter has very good potential, again, like a great technology, but like, again, like if you ask me personally, what the things that I'm spending time on, it's still native, because to me, that's like the safe bet sort of thing.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
All right. So, I'll ask you a couple questions about, I was going to ask you some more Android questions, but they're kind of, I mean, we've all heard these answers before. So let's go. I want to ask you about working at home, because you work at home, and since this COVID stuff, a lot of people have been working at home. So I'm sure there's a lot of challenges that people are running into that they've never, run into before. Maybe you have your community computer in your house, in your kitchen, and now suddenly you have to work in your kitchen or something like that. There's going to be difficulties involved in that. So like, how do you manage that? Because you obviously work from home. I'm assuming you don't have somewhere that you go to work. I don't think I asked you.
Not particularly, no.
Right. So you work from home, you live with somebody, you have a girlfriend.
Yeah.
How do you manage your time, and how do you keep her away at the the work when work needs to be done and that kind of thing?
So that's a really good question. I think I think there's two parts, right? There's the personal part, which is you need to have some sort of mental differentiation between I'm at work and I'm not at work, because essentially if you work from home, you're at work all the time. And that's a problem. And the best way that I found to handle that is I have a setup. I think I mentioned it on my podcast, but I don't have a standing desk. I have a laptop tray that I put on a desk, and then I put my laptop on top. So now I can stand and work, right? So most of the day I stand and work in the living room if my partner's not home, or if she is, if it's for a small while. And if she's home, I go upstairs, and I've got a desk upstairs, and I'll stick it on there. But the differentiation for me is at no other time other than when I'm working, am I standing at a desk with a laptop tray on top of the desk with a laptop on top. That just doesn't happen. So right now I'm working, and the rest of the time I'm not. And that works great for me. And then I think in terms of being at home and other people, I think it's just you have to have that separation, or you have to have this understanding of separation. So for example, if you've got your headphones on, then you're at work, and somebody could look and they'll be like, right, Rob's got his headphones on, so he's working. As opposed to if you don't, then it's this strange thing where it's like, well, you're standing right there, so why can't I talk to you? And I also find it hard, because as a programmer, it's like you're working on something, right? And in my head, it's like, well, there's 15 different things going on, and if I get interrupted, I lose that train of thought, and now I have to start again. Yeah. But to anybody else, that people that aren't programmers, or even people that are, and they don't realize that's what's going on, because I could be sitting here writing an email, and I could be sitting here programming, and it looks exactly the same to anybody else that's looking. So I think it's just you have to have that differentiation, which is either saying I'm working for the next hour, or putting your headphones on, or I don't know, maybe you wear a special t-shirt where that says I'm at work. But you have to have some sort of differentiation, otherwise it doesn't work. Yeah.
Like like you're saying, like some kind of visual trigger, or like visual representation of like, hey, I'm working. Someone looks at you and you're like,
exactly. Yeah. Because I remember, I don't know if it was Tim Ferriss, but I remember someone talking about when they're in the office and the way they used to get stuff done was
it was Tim Ferriss. I know what you're going to say. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think he used to have a sign that he used to put up so that people would be, so it's basically like, do not disturb. Right. And I think that works super good. And if you can't figure that out, then you have to figure out, I need to go somewhere else. And if that ends up being, let's say you're in a studio and you have to go and stand and face the corner, and that's where you work, then that's where you work. But I figure like, to me, that's the important part, is you have to have that differentiation between I'm at home and I'm at work.
Yeah. Yeah, a couple of things I thought of when you said that is, when you're working as a programmer, there's somebody like my wife looks at me and it just looks like I'm on the computer. Like, am I answering an email? Am I browsing the internet? Am I doing something that doesn't matter? Or am I building something? It looks all the same. Yeah. But like, there's a big difference between what's going on in your head. Like, because if you're building something, I always think of it as like you have a scaffold. You've assembled this scaffold, and you have all of and you're trying to, like, it's difficult because it gets huge in your head, and you're like trying to steady it and like make sure that it doesn't collapse. Yeah. And then somebody says something to you, the scaffold collapses. and then you're like, and you lose it instantly, and you're like, and you answer the question, no matter how trivial it is. You look back at your computer and you're like, fuck, my scaffold is in shambles. Now I have to rebuild this scaffold before I can even get back to, what I was doing.
Yeah, you get it. See?
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I got this apartment. I have this tiny little 400 square foot apartment because working from home, it was just too difficult to like. Wife would come in, simple question, and I'm like, see ya, scaffold, I guess. All right. Because it's just so hard to be like, don't bother me. Because the questions can be important that they ask, but they're not important enough that they can't wait till the end of the day. And like that's the differentiation.
Yeah. But that's the problem with being at home, is that other people can't tell. They can't tell the difference. And even if you're wearing, I feel like even if you're wearing a t-shirt that says "Do not disturb," like if someone has a question, you're right there. The natural thing is to just
if it's
ask the question.
Quick second. If it's a quick question, then
yeah. But it's like you said, that quick second of like, do you want something, or should we get this, or whatever, the whole scaffold comes down, and
I don't have the mental capacity to maintain my scaffold.
No, the scaffold's too big. I think once it gets to like 3 planks of wood, it's fine, but once it gets to like 15, it's coming down.
Yeah, it's coming down. Oh, that's great. So do you have any like in that same like vein, do you have any like time management like tactics that like, never mind people coming in and disturbing you, like do you have any like things that you do daily to like be efficient? Like I'll give you an example of things I do. So usually what I do, like you mentioned that in the companies that you work for, you do these sprints, like 2-week sprints. You have like, this is what we want to do. We do these sprints. I do like hour-long sprints and maybe even half an hour-long sprints where I look at what I'm working on and I'm like, okay, what are the things that I need to build right now? And I'm like, okay, I need to do this. Then after that, I can do this, and then after I can do this. So I write it down in like I have a notepad or a markdown file anyway, and I'm like, okay, this is next objective. This is this objective, and then below that I have like other objectives that like if I finish that list, look at this list and like move forward. Do you do anything like that to like manage your time?
So in terms of lists, yes, I'm a big fan of lists, mostly because it gets things out of my head. So then I don't have
it's like,
because otherwise I have this space in my head that's been taken up with something I have to remember. Whereas if I write it down, I can just forget it and I can look at the list later. So I like doing that. And I think I do it in a similar vein as you, which is like, this is the most important thing, then this is next, and this is next, and whatever. And you get through as much as you can. In terms of time management, not particularly. Like, I think I've kind of figured out what the best time is that I work, which is usually early. So I wake up at about 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. and I'll just start working because that's when I work the best. And as it gets towards the end of the day is when I don't work the best. And I think I realized that from being in jobs that were in an office where you're in for a set period of time, but I know I do my best work before, let's say 2 p.m. And after that, you could just send me home or keep me here, but you're going to probably get the same level of work. So that's probably the only time management thing that I have, is whatever is the best time for someone to work is when they should work, and not feel like, oh, you know, I suppose it's hard as a freelancer. It's a bit easier, but working from home makes it, working from home makes it a lot easier. But yeah, if you have a job that's like super strict, it's hard. But if you have the option and you know I work best whenever, then that's when you should work. And then the only other thing is I try and get out for like frequent walks to like break up the day. And also because I find walking, problem solving kind of happens by itself. So
yeah, that's a weird thing. I do the same thing. It's strange. It's a strange thing. It's like it really is like a phenomenon.
Yeah.
I don't know the like scientific reason, but like it is definitely 100% a real thing. Like you have a problem in your head. You can be like, imagine, we've all been frustrated. Imagine all you people listening. I know I can feel your frustration because I know you've all been frustrated. You're sitting there. It doesn't make sense. You keep saying this to yourself. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. This should work. That doesn't make sense. And then you get up and you go for a walk. It could be 15 minutes. Yeah. You stop thinking about it, and suddenly the answer just comes to you.
Yeah.
And like this has happened to me thousands of times. Yeah. It's a real phenomenon. I don't understand.
Yeah. I don't know how it works either, but I'm the same as you. I know that it works. Like that's how I approach when it gets to that point where I'm looking at the code and I'm like, this code works. Like I know it works. I know the thing says it doesn't work, but 100% this works.
Yeah.
my solution to that problem is, right, I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to do something else, and I come back to it in an hour, and in an hour I get back and I'm like, oh, I'm so stupid, I missed whatever, there's a comma missing or something. But yeah, it definitely works.
Weird. It's a weird, very weird thing. I wish I understood it. So I could harness this power.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to finish up with my questions, I guess. I told the audience, I want to end the podcast because we've already been 40 minutes, but I told the audience that we would answer questions. So I guess we should answer some questions.
Sure.
Let's scroll all the way to the top. You get a lot of hellos, upcoming Kotlin courses. I'm not going to answer any probably course related questions. I'm just going to go through any stuff that you guys have about like Android or freelancing, things like that. So somebody asks, actually, I can't answer that question, and I know you can't, so I'm just going to skip that one too. Why do they still teach Java in college? That's not a bad question. He answered that actually, because it's still a very like practical skill to have.
Yeah.
You have server-side development, you have Android development.
It gives you a lot of options.
There's a lot of options still. It's Kotlin is definitely a much more pleasurable language to use for sure. But there's still technically nothing wrong with Java.
I think if you give Kotlin like 10 years, the way that it's going, probably they'll start teaching Kotlin because it's good for so many things. But right now, if you've got Java, you're very hireable.
Jairus, I think this is how he says his name, or how I pronounce his name. There are tons of Android development programming codes, but what should I choose for a career? I'm guessing he meant, Kotlin, Java, or Flutter, or any other cross-platform thing. I mean, I would say if like Rob said, Java will give you the most options, and Kotlin is very natural to know after that. And the highest probability that you will have success is to stay native anyway. Like you're probably gonna have the most job prospects for now anyway, and this could change. But that's what I would say anyway. I have a question for Rob. How does he divide his time for internal testing? I was going to ask about testing. I forgot to. Internal testing before the production of the application in freelancing.
Okay. Are we talking about, or I guess that's for you to decide, are we talking about internal testing like unit tests or internal testing like QA, I'm testing the app myself?
Yeah, I don't know. I would, let me read it again. How he divides time for internal testing before the production of the application in freelancing. I would just assume testing the app overall, like all encompassing testing, like passing it to your QA team, but also writing unit tests,
Okay. I guess I'll give the cliff notes on the whole process, which is write the code, then unit testing as much of the code as you can that makes sense. If you've got a constant that's 1, don't need to write a test that make sure the constant is 1. And then your unit test pass. So now, because basically all you want is a good confidence level that what you've done is right and it's not going to break the app. So you write unit tests. If you're writing instrumentation tests, you write those and make sure that not only does the code do what it's supposed to do, but what the code does is what actually is supposed to happen. And then when you're writing code, you test it yourself, right? You don't just write code, it compiles, like you build it, you put it on the device, press the button, does it do what it's supposed to do? And then you hand it off to QA, and then QA will make sure that it does what it's supposed to do based on the business criteria. So they don't care about the technical aspects. They care if I press this button and it's supposed to follow a user, is that user now followed? And that's basically outside of your realm of development. You've done the code for that. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, it comes back to you. You rewrite it, you test it, it goes out again.
Cool. All right. So now, it's pretty straightforward. So as this next one is, they're kind of the same. There's 2 of them that are kind of the same question. How difficult is it to get a job as a Android dev for a fresher? Which is, I'm assuming, well, I know it's like an Indian term for a guy who just graduated or like guy who's fairly new.
We'll go with junior or something.
Junior, like And then there's another question that says, as an Android, this is all caps, by the way. So he's yelling. Ravi.
Serious.
He's serious. He's yelling. As an Android developer, what fundamental skills is a must? And so I think these are kind of the same question, because I'm assuming Ravi is kind of probably a fresher or junior.
Yeah. Okay. So how hard is it to get a job as a junior is, in my opinion, not very hard if you build some sort of portfolio, which can, so the hardest thing is the same with every job, right? is people want to hire you based on the experience that you have, and they don't want to hire you if you have no experience. But how do you get experience if nobody's going to hire you?
Classic question.
Yeah, but as a programmer, you can create your own experience. So, you know, if you want to do Android development, you're junior, you know some stuff, go and build something. It doesn't have to be, it could be anything, right? It doesn't have to be fancy. You could build it, you could put it on the Play Store, and now on your CV, you've built whatever your app is called. That's your first experience. And then you can add another one and you get a bit more. So, you know, let's say you gave it 3 months and you built 3 different apps, and they don't have to be complicated. Like I've seen portfolio apps that were literally just an image, text, scroll view, and for a junior, like that seems like a lot of work, right? So, but it's still more than the other junior who has nothing other than them saying, oh, I can do this stuff, but there's no proof. So that would be the first thing. And then I think the second thing would be, what was the second part of that question? What was the shouting bit?
It's just like, what is the fundamental skills? Like
the fundamentals would be just the basics, like activity, fragment, recycle view, image view, all of that basic stuff. And then the commonly used SDKs on top of that. So if you're loading images from, like you want to load images for the web, so you know you need Glider, Picasso, you need to know how to do networking. That's a definite must. And
so
retrofit, exactly. And then once you've got that, that's the basics. And then I would definitely say Room and RX Java are super important. RX Java less so, because you know you could figure it out if you get the job. Room is pretty important because most apps have some sort of persistent storage, and it used to be Realm. I like Room much better, and I haven't worked with a company that uses Realm in probably like 3 or 4 years. So
Room is great. It's works excellent, easy to use. It's great.
Yeah.
This next question is, what is your thought on single activity? So a single activity and then fragments compared to, you know, multiple activities. And it says everything with Jetpack navigation. Oh yeah. So what? Yeah. So basically, the single activity question: should you build a single activity and use fragments, and should you use Jetpack navigation?
So I guess there's 2 things. So Jetpack navigation, I have no either or. With that, go for it if you want. I think I guess if we're leaning this towards being a freelancer, the one thing that I would say you always have to keep in mind is you're going to end up at some point, whether it's now or later, working with other people. And if you're a freelancer and you built this app, someone's going to end up working on this app after you. So, you know, you can go with a single activity approach and have fragments everywhere. And if everybody knows how to do it, then it's great. But if they don't, then don't do that approach, because you're just handicapping everyone else because you know how to do it. I'm the same thing. I don't have a preference either way. Like I definitely advocate fragments, whether they're in a single activity or lots of multiple activities that contain one fragment. And the only reason that I do that is because I worked in so many companies where they're like, right, the app is supposed to look like this. And then, you know, a week before release, oh, by the way, we want to move this thing to this other screen. And if it's in a fragment, that's super easy to do. And if it's one activity and there's no fragment, then it's just a bunch of work that you don't need. And most of the companies that I work for, they always change design stuff all the time. So if you make stuff that's easy, one, it has to be easy to maintain by someone else and understandable. And then if it's easy to move around as well, then that's a bonus. Because then, you know, I've worked on apps where for the iOS guy who's working on the iOS app, it takes him 3 days to do something that it took me 20 minutes because mine was in a fragment and he built it exactly to spec as they wanted, not knowing that they were going to change their mind. So
that's a good answer. Yeah. Again, very practical answer here from Rob Joseph.
I have personal preferences, but for freelancing, I just feel like you have to just look at it from more like a business perspective and working with other people. Like there's no point using the latest and greatest if everyone doesn't know it. So
yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, like I definitely prefer the single activity. I find that to be the best way to manage everything. But yeah, if I was a freelancer, like probably very few people would be doing that. And a good practical tip would be like, use fragments. You could, but if you are going to use activities, using an activity with a fragment on top of it, even if it's just one, is much more is a better idea, because not only is the fragment going to be easier to change if your requirements change, but if you say you run into a remote config situation like we were talking at the beginning of the podcast, you could have string A brings up fragment A, and then string B brings up fragment C, all from that same activity. If you had 2 different activities, that becomes much more difficult to handle.
Yeah, 100%.
Cool. All right. What's kind of just answered that. That was like, what is a checklist for when you're about to apply for a job? You kind of just answered that, the fundamental skills question. Any upcoming courses for me? Again, Ravi is yelling as an Android developer. What is the most fundamental skill? This is like the third time. He's screaming and we answered him. So he's probably very happy now. A lot of hellos. What as an Android is a good skill to learn? MNC. I don't even know what that is. Do you know what that is?
I don't know what MNC is. No.
Never heard of that either.
No.
Okay. Jetpack Compose. So this was a question that I said that I didn't think either of us knew how to answer because I don't know anything about Compose. I'm assuming you don't know anything about Compose.
I have a basic idea of what it is. That's it.
Right. So yeah, neither of us have used it.
Probably no.
Yeah. Sorry. Android development is a pain in the ass. They're releasing new stuff very often, and you cannot keep up while working an 8-hour day. True. That's why I have a job, because I digest this stuff for you and make it easy for you to learn. Literally why I have a job is because there is so much stuff coming out all the time. It is pretty much impossible to keep up with all of the new stuff. Well, I think we've like pretty much answered. When it comes to performance, we should always choose native because we face lots of problems with plugins. Come works in Android. Yeah, it's not really a question, just a statement. All right, fine. We're oh, here's the last question. Is it a must to learn testing if you want a job? This is the last question, and then we're gonna stop the podcast.
No. The answer is no. Just be aware of it. I've done so many jobs where it says on the spec you need to know TDD or you need to know BDD or we do unit, all this kind of stuff, and then you get there, and one is 99% of companies don't do it because they don't have time, and two, you can figure it out as long as you like just understand what testing is, and then you can figure out how to do the test later.
Yeah, you can go to CodingWithMitch.com and watch one of my courses on testing, and then boom. There you go. You're all caught up. You know exactly what to do. There's a lot of questions here about Flutter, and I'm assuming that they're in here because you guys are just coming into the podcast now. But we've already talked about Flutter, so I would say go back. I can't remember at which point we talked about it, but we talked about Flutter. It was probably halfway through or something. I don't know, but anyway, we did talk about Flutter. So go back if you're curious about that. So that's gonna be it. Thanks, Rob, for coming on. I enjoyed it just as I did last time. Yeah. This is your Friday. I believe it's the end of your work week now. It is
the end of my work week.
So what time is it?
It's 5 to 6. 5:55. I remember that in the UK we say I'd say it's 5 to 6, and like in the States, and I think Canada does the same. You would be very specific and be like 5:55. So
I get a little bit of both.
Okay.
Down over here in North America.
All right.
But yeah, so have a good rest of your Friday. Have a good weekend. Thanks for coming on. I enjoyed it. And awesome. Everybody make sure to go. I got links down below. Follow Rob's podcast. I was a guest on his podcast somewhere around 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. And I would also say that Mitch's episode is the most listened episode in the first. Well, you're the second most listened episode ever, but you're the most listened episode if you don't include episode 1, which is where everyone starts. And it's been out for like 3 months. So
right.
You should go and check it out.
It's a good episode.
Yeah, it's good.
How do you have those analytics?
I host my podcast on Buzzsprout, and they give you like pretty good analytics on cool. Downloads. Like it's pretty like if I press download on my app now and then I go to Buzzsprout, it will have recorded that somebody downloaded my app and my podcast, and it will tell you which podcast player, what platform, where in the world.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I post my podcast on Blueberry or whatever it's called. Yeah. They have no analytics, so I have no idea, zero idea.
There's another one to that, which is I think it's called PodTrack, which is like a prefix you can add to your MP3 URL, and they also give you decent analytics. And Buzzsprout did a podcast about it, and they were pretty in line with Buzzsprout's analytics as well. So that's a free one if you can add that to your MP3 link, because I add it to my Buzzsprout, so I have both. Cool. And yeah, it's pretty cool.
I should look into that. Okay. Well, thanks. And maybe we'll do it again.
Yeah, definitely. Anytime.
Okay. Yeah.
Cheers. Cool.